Chapter 8. Kethan, the Burden. The twin sons of Catharis Prime were beginning their descent toward the horizon when an attendant entered the council chamber. It had been a long day of debate disguised as discussion. The Bogan lords were demanding answers, and the Confederation was looking for someone to blame. Lord Cor Virelis of House Virelis, who was today's chairman, stopped mid-sentence and motioned for the attendant to continue. "I have a message for Lord Rye," the page said, as he hurried to Kethan's seat at the round table and handed him a message tablet. "If you would excuse me, Chairman Virelis, urgent news. May we adjourn for today? I must see to these messages. They may have a bearing on our discussions." "We may adjourn for today, Lord Rye, but make no mistake," cautioned the distinguished man with his dark, meticulously groomed beard. "Your incursion into Bogan territory, no matter the cause, must be dealt with." Chairman Virelis' ceremonial robes bore the deep blue of House Virelis, embroidered with silver thread that caught the dying light from the chamber's windows. Lord Virelis continued, "The Bogan leaders are demanding an explanation. They're looking for any excuse to justify expanding into our territory, and your mission may have handed them one." Kethan wanted to tell them that their duty to protect the innocent, to help those who could not or would not fight back against Bogan tyranny, was not confined to any borders in space. It was a moral obligation, the very thing that separated the Ashla from the Bogan. But instead, he held his tongue and simply replied, "Yes, Chairman." "Agreed. Until tomorrow." Kethan rose from his seat and strode toward the chamber doors, his boots striking the ancient stone with hurried precision. Behind him, the murmur of voices resumed as the other lords began their own private calculations. High Warden Ashira de Ven and Madame Juno Fen exchanged a brief glance before rising from their seats with conscious discretion, following at a respectful distance. Kethan made his way to the lower levels of the stronghold, descending to the military communications center. Captain Kenkwana stood over two signalers monitoring a bank of consoles, holographic projections flickering above several displays. "Captain," Kethan said as he positioned himself around the communications table. On cue, Juno and Ashira entered with silent nods, taking positions on either side of him. "First, the bad news," Kenkwana began. "Your sister, she never made it to Anusa. When we contacted the monks on Thylos, they told us she'd left barely a day after our forces departed." "Where is she now?" Kethan's voice carried the edge of barely controlled concern. "Unknown, sir." Juno's hand found Kethan's arm, a gesture meant as much to steady herself as to calm him. "Her fighter's beacon." "Dropped out of hyperspace," Kenkwana replied, regret weighing his words. "We can't even confirm she was clear of Bogan territory when it happened." Silence settled over the room like a shroud. Each of them struggled to process not only what they had heard, but what it might mean for Mira and her pilot. Distress signals? None. "We have probe droids ready to launch from the battlecruiser Argona, but deploying them means entering Bogan space." "Launch them," Kethan snapped. "Now." "Sir, given the current tensions, your recent incursion into their territory..." Kethan's jaw tightened. The probes could be seen as another act of aggression. Kenkwana nodded grimly. Kethan glanced at his companions, reading the same conflict in their faces that burned in his chest. "Perhaps we should review Valka's message. It may contain information that could help with Mira's situation," Juno suggested quietly. Kenkwana gestured to one of the signalers. The frozen hologram of Valka materialized, then began to speak. "Mission accomplished," the grey-robed figure announced. "We lost your intelligence officer early on, Juno. We're so very sorry, but we encountered a Bogan lord." Valka paused, heavy with significance. "Kethan, it was Cathedral." The name hit like a sudden punch, sharp and unexpected. In the blue glow of the holotable, three faces registered the same mixture of shock and grim understanding. "But we secured the asset," Valka's projected image continued. En route to your position now. The holographic image froze, indicating the coded message had reached its end. The room fell silent, each person lost in their own dark calculations. Can we contact Valka? Is he clear of Bogan territory? We can try, Kwana replied, nodding to the signaller. Open a secure channel. Kethan picked up a headset from the communications table and spoke into the microphone. Vanguard, this is Hightower, come in. Hightower calling, do you copy? Static crackled through the silence. Kethan repeated the call. Static. Then a reply, Hightower, copy. Go for V. V, Kethan exhaled with relief. Are you clear of Bogan territory? Affirmative. En route to your position. Problem? Mira's missing. Kethan closed his eyes briefly, drawing a steadying breath before the weight of command pressed him forward. I need you and Echo Team to reroute to Onusa. What about the HVT? Valka's voice asked from the speakers. Kethan glanced at Juno, who motioned for him to cover his microphone. He pressed his palm over the device. My intelligence officer was the only one who knew what our asset looked like, Juno said quietly. The only one who could identify her. If he's dead. She left the question hanging. How did the team know they had the right person? We could send them your assets dossier, Kwana offered. They can verify your asset's identity right now. No, Juno shook her head. For deep cover assets, we keep no records whatsoever. No images, no files, nothing. All contact is face-to-face for their protection. Ashira leaned forward. How did the Bogan even know about the operation? The room answered in silence. There were only a handful of people in the know, and all of them trusted. Ashira's voice cut through the room like a blade. We need to get to the bottom of the leak, she asserted. Hightower. Orders, came Valka's voice over the comm. Kethan uncovered the microphone. We'll meet you at Onusa. Copy that, Hightower. Rendezvous at Onusa, edge of Bogan territory. We'll transmit coordinates, Kwana spoke into the comm, before raising his voice to address both Valka and those in the room. Best not to land too close to the monastery. Copy that. Vanguard out. As the communication ended, Kethan stared at the tactical display showing Mira's possible last known position. A single red dot marking her last known coordinates in the darkness between worlds. Around him, the soft hum of the holographic projectors seemed to mock the silence where his sister's voice should have been. Too many questions, too few answers, and time running out with each passing moment. Kethan left the communications center with leaden steps, the weight of too many crises pressing down on his shoulders like armor forged from lead. The corridors of House Rye's ancient stronghold seemed to close in around him as he climbed the winding stone stairs, each step echoing with the ghosts of decisions yet to be made. He needed air. He needed space to think. The balcony doors opened with a whisper, and the cool night air washed over him like a benediction. Below, the city of Noterra spread out in all directions, a galaxy of lights that had thrived under House Rye's protection for over a century. Speeders traced lazy arcs between the towering spires, their running lights like fireflies against the velvet darkness, and the great defensive installations stood sentinel on the horizon, monuments to his family's commitment to this world and its people. His father had been a strong leader, a man who seemed to effortlessly balance the competing demands of protecting the quadrant, the planet, and his family. The decisions that now kept Kethan awake at night had appeared to flow from his father like water from a spring, natural, necessary, inevitable. Now Kethan wondered, as he had countless times even before his father's death, if he possessed what it took to follow in those formidable footsteps. The doubt was a cancer that had been growing in his chest for years, fed by every difficult choice, every casualty report, every political crisis that seemed to spiral beyond his control. Am I interrupting? The voice came from behind him, warm with the familiarity of old friendship. Kethan turned to see the familiar face of Goji. "Goji," he answered warmly. "No, not at all." Goji Khan was older by perhaps 15 years, but still the same steady presence who had grown up alongside him in the Ashla ranks. First as his father's protege, then Kethan's closest friend and advisor, and now something closer to a brother. The respected Ashla warrior joined him at the railing, his presence a comfort born of shared history and unquestioned loyalty. They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, watching the city's evening ritual unfold below them. "Your sister was trained well," Goji offered, after the silence had stretched long enough to accommodate the weight of unspoken worries. "She can take care of herself." Kethan nodded, though his eyes remained fixed on the city lights and the graceful dance of flying ships weaving between the towers. The words were meant to comfort, but they barely touched the storm of anxiety churning in his chest. Kethan didn't respond immediately, his gaze still fixed on the city below. Goji simply smiled, having learned long ago not to fill every silence with words, understanding that some thoughts needed time to crystallize before they could be spoken. Finally, Kethan's voice emerged, quiet and heavy with self-doubt. "I worry about my sister, but more than that, I worry that perhaps I am not the right person to lead House Rai." He turned to face his longtime friend and advisor, for Goji had become both over the years since his father's death, his eyes holding the kind of wisdom that came only from watching history unfold from the shadows of power. "I've endangered our détente with the Bogan because I answered a distress signal," Kethan continued, the words spilling out like water through a broken dam. "But I would do it again without hesitation. I dragged 4 other great houses into battle with me, and now I've endangered the solidarity of the entire Ashla coalition." His voice grew rougher with each confession. "Maybe I am not the one to lead House Rai, Goji. Maybe my father chose wrong." Goji listened intently, watching his young friend's anger and anguish rise like a tide. He had seen this same struggle in Kethan's father years ago, the crushing weight of responsibility, the impossible choices that came with power, the gnawing question that haunted every leader worth following. Am I doing more harm than good? When the silence stretched long enough to ensure that Kethan had spoken his piece, Goji finally responded, his voice carrying the authority of someone who had witnessed history in the making. "Under your guidance, the Ashla forged our fragile peace agreement," he said, each word deliberate and weighted with truth. "It was you whom they chose to negotiate with. It was you who urged them to the bargaining table when lesser leaders would have chosen the certainty of war over the uncertainty of peace." "But it took so many years of fighting," Kethan countered, his self-frustration bleeding through every word. "So many lives lost, good people who trusted me to find a better way." "That was not your fault," Goji said firmly, his voice cutting through Kethan's self-recrimination like a blade through silk. "The Bogan are stubborn. The Bogan are power-hungry. You could not control them then, any more than you can control their actions and thoughts today." He paused, letting the words settle before delivering the truth that Kethan needed to hear. "You are just a man, Kethan. A good man, but still just a man. You cannot save everyone. You cannot prevent every tragedy. You can only do what you believe is right and accept the consequences." "If not you, then who else?" Goji asked. "You," Kethan answered. Goji chuckled and responded with a smile. "I am a warrior, one of the best, but you are a leader." Goji's voice carried the weight of absolute conviction, "and we need a leader now more than ever." Kethan stood motionless, absorbing and weighing each word spoken by his friend. When others are paralyzed by fear, afraid of making the wrong choice, afraid of the consequences, you do not hesitate to take action. But more than that, the people, like me, trust that your choice of the right thing to do will always serve our best interests rather than your own. He paused, letting the words settle like stones thrown into still water. "And that is enough, Kethan. That is more than enough." The evening breeze stirred between them, carrying with it the distant sounds of the city below, laughter from taverns, the hum of late-shift workers heading home, the eternal rhythm of life continuing despite the weight of galactic politics pressing down on those who bore the burden of leadership. "I'm glad to have you as my counselor," Kethan finally allowed himself to say, the words emerging with the relief of a long-held breath finally released. "And as my friend." "And I you," Goji replied, the simple words carrying decades of shared history and unshakable loyalty. "Now is not the time to second-guess yourself," Goji continued, turning toward the fortress doors as the first stars appeared in Notera's night sky. "Your father believed in you, Kethan. Perhaps it's time you learned to do the same." Kethan nodded, feeling something ease in his chest, not the complete dissolution of doubt, for that would have been too much to hope for, but at least the knowledge that he did not carry these burdens alone. As the two men entered the fortress together, Kethan's mind drifted back to the tactical display. That single red dot floating in the void between safety and enemy space. His sister was missing. His extraction team carried an asset of unknown value, and somewhere in the darkness, Karth Dral was orchestrating moves in a game whose rules Kethan was only beginning to understand.
The weight of command had never felt heavier, but at least now he knew he didn't carry it alone.